We begin with new allegations in a Minnesota voter fraud case that first came to light this summer. 2 people pleaded guilty in federal court to being paid to help register voters. In all, 500 to 600 fraudulent voter registration applications were submitted to election officials in offices in 13 Minnesota counties.
All right, guys, let's get into what the mainstream outlets don't want you to know. Minnesota, once praised as a symbol of fair elections, has become ground zero for one of the most alarming voter fraud scandals in recent memory. Across 13 counties, more than 500 falsified voter registrations were uncovered, hundreds of fake identities flooding election offices. And here's the kicker. Investigators say the scheme was bankrolled by taxpayer money. Your dollars, used to finance deception. And looming behind it all? Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, a name that, once again, finds itself at the center of controversy. The very system she vowed to protect now stands compromised from within her own political stronghold.
Esme Murphy has been following this case, and she joins us now. Esme?
Hi there, Frank. It was some sharp election workers in Carver County who realized the names and addresses on the voter registration forms did not match with any county residents. Prosecutors charged 2 people with 1 count each of voter registration fraud. According to the charging documents, the 2 were paid by an unnamed foundation to help register voters. The 2 defendants pled guilty this summer and have since moved out of...
It's no coincidence that every time voter fraud surfaces in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar's name follows. The same Omar once accused of campaign finance violations, ballot harvesting, and ethics breaches. Now tied again through witnesses, whispers, and financial records. Election workers first noticed fake addresses, sparking an FBI-backed investigation that traced payments to voter registration helpers. 2 suspects pleaded guilty, but the bigger question remained: who funded them? Every lead, every document, every bank trail pointed closer to Omar's political circle. And that, more than the fraud itself, is what shakes the establishment.
The scope of the 2-year FBI and state investigation was not previously known.
And it's very significant that they said today it was 13 counties, between 500 and 600 fake voter registrations. And that's just from 2 of the independent contractors that worked with this group.
The investigation involved scouring hundreds of records.
On guidance from the FBI, the voter registration applications were mailed directly to the election lead, and instructions were shared to use gloves when handling the forms.
In testimony before the committee, Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon says the system designed to catch voter fraud.
Then came the most chilling discovery. Workers were told to wear gloves while handling the fake registration forms. Not for hygiene, but to avoid leaving fingerprints. Over 2 years, across 13 counties, federal agents followed the money, cross-examined witnesses, and mapped out a network far deeper than anyone imagined. Yet many names linked to the operation remained sealed. Officials insisted the system worked, but what they didn't say was how close this scheme came to slipping through undetected. Even the Secretary of State admitted this wasn't about illegal voting, but fake registrations, a direct assault on the foundation of electoral trust. Through it all, Omar's shadow hung over every hearing, every report. One question echoed through Washington. How could this happen under her watch? And what else is still hidden?
This is a case about individuals who conspired to submit false voter registration applications. This is not a case about fraudulent votes. And this is ultimately a case of the system working.
How many were in the system is challenged.
Republican Committee Chair Kristen Robbins, who is running for governor, says she has additional concerns that the unnamed foundation that paid the 2 workers is funded by state taxpayer dollars.
99% of their budget comes from state grants. So this is a group that the state is funding and that then went out and did these voter registrations.
The scandal's darkest twist came with the money trail. The very foundation accused of paying these workers, the one at the heart of the fraud, is funded almost entirely by state grants. 99% of its budget comes from taxpayers. In other words, the public paid for its own deception. Republican Chair Kristen Robbins demanded accountability, calling out the misuse of public funds and demanding full transparency. From Ilhan Omar's office? Silence. No statement. No denial. Nothing. And that silence, more than any rebuttal, spoke volumes. Once again, the familiar pattern emerged. Silence first, deflection later. But this time, patience is wearing thin.
Now, the hearing left a lot of people, including us, with a lot of questions that were not answered. One of the big ones, the 12 other counties where the fraud was discovered are not being.
Today met to talk about how to prevent voter registration fraud.
Follows a case where a Nevada couple pleaded guilty to filling out hundreds of fraudulent voter registration applications in 13 Minnesota counties. Richard Reeve was at the House Fraud Prevention Committee hearing.
Well, more ideas than answers from this particular committee. You know, this began many, many months ago when local elections officials noticed some inconsistencies in some of these applications.
Meanwhile, the FBI's probe went far beyond paperwork. It turned into a full-scale investigation tracing money, messages, and influence. Agents uncovered encrypted communications linking nonprofits, advocacy groups, and political figures, all revolving around Omar's political orbit. This wasn't random misconduct. It was a coordinated system shielded by political power. When lawmakers pressed for answers, officials gave the same response: no further comment. And just as the investigation intensified, two key players conveniently relocated out of state. Every lead, every reluctant witness, every sealed document pointed in one direction. The deeper they dug, the closer Omar's name surfaced.
Secretary of State's office, the FBI, and those local elections officials began investigating to find out what was happening. The House committee had some pointed questions about the case. Federal court documents filed in June say Ronnie Williams and Lorraine Lee Combs filled out voter registration forms with fake names, addresses, date of birth, and social security numbers, and that an unnamed foundation paid for them.
There doesn't seem to be a check when this group.
Eventually, prosecutors confirmed what many had long suspected. This wasn't driven by ideology, but by profit. Workers were paid per registration, turning fraud into a business. By 2023, lawmakers scrambled to close the loopholes, but the damage was already done. And while Ilhan Omar continued to appear on national TV preaching morality and fairness, corruption thrived in her own district. It's politics at its oldest, preaching virtue while practicing exploitation. Her speeches about integrity now echo hollow against the evidence piling up. The hypocrisy no longer needs to be exposed. It speaks for itself.
Submitted the fraudulent applications. So I don't know where that breakdown comes in.
The motive? Money. Prosecutors say the foundation paid Williams for each completed application. State lawmakers passed a law in 2023 banning that practice.
This is not a case about fraudulent votes. And this is ultimately a case of the system working to detect these applications so they could be appropriately challenged and referred to law enforcement for prosecution and conviction.
But we wondered, what about now? DFL and GOP members of the committee disagree.
Any new evidence of fraud at this point that you guys have been able to?
When the House hearings began, they descended into chaos. Part investigation, part political theater. Democrats dismissed the mounting evidence as isolated mistakes, while Republicans demanded to know where the grant money really went. It wasn't just a partisan clash. It was a battle for integrity itself. And yet, through all the shouting, one name was conspicuously missing from the room: Ilhan Omar. She didn't show up. She didn't speak. She didn't even acknowledge the scandal. Still, her fingerprints were everywhere, woven through the foundation at the heart of the controversy. The truth was visible to all, but few dared to confront it.
You know, we have not seen it, but I'm very concerned that the foundation in question gets their entire budget from state and federal grants. That to me is of concern, and that's something that I hope to talk to the Department of Health about and other departments that are their grantors.
Is there any new evidence of fraud, new cases at all that you all have found?
I mean, in this committee? Well, I will say the press, we've had a couple folks come in that the press had identified, and nothing through this committee process at all.
Now, Kristen Robbins, the chair of that committee, says she still sees some red flags out here. She would like the Secretary of State's office to do more vetting before those applications are passed on to those local county elections offices.
In the end, Minnesota's system working became its cruelest irony. Yes, the fraud was caught, but only after it was funded, processed, and nearly slipped through unchecked. The culprits may have vanished from the headlines, but Omar's image remains polished, untouched by accountability. Yet the public's faith is fading. Every silence, every evasion, every scandal chips away at trust. This is no longer about partisanship. It's about the soul of democracy itself. Because when taxpayer dollars are twisted into political weapons, the threat doesn't end with one scandal or one politician, it spreads. And until Ilhan Omar faces these questions directly, that threat will remain, unchecked, unresolved, and growing.